She had always dreamed of this moment. Years of practice, endless hours of repetition, and countless sacrifices had led her here, to the biggest stage of her life. Even though she had performed in front of audiences before, nothing felt quite like this. The hall was enormous, filled with thousands of people who had come to see the famous pianist perform. The energy in the room was electric, and every step she took toward the piano made her heart beat faster. She stopped for a moment backstage, letting her eyes wander over the glowing lights and the rows upon rows of seats. The faces in the audience were a blur, but she could feel their anticipation pressing down on her like a physical weight. She thought about the critics who would write their reviews the next day, about the fans who expected perfection, about her own expectations. The pressure was suffocating. For a moment, she questioned everything. Had she practiced enough? Would her fingers move as they should? Would the music come out right? Her mind began to replay memories of past performances, some good, some not so good. She remembered the time her hands had shaken so badly that she had missed an important note. She remembered the applause she had received when she had succeeded, and how sweet it had felt. But the fear of failure was stronger than any memory of success. She had worked hard to become famous, but now, fame felt like a burden, a spotlight that could expose her every flaw. Backstage, the quiet hum of activity did nothing to calm her nerves. Stagehands moved quickly, adjusting lights and checking microphones. Musicians tuned their instruments, and the conductor went over notes one last time. Everyone seemed calm, almost oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. She felt alone, even though thousands of people were waiting to watch her perform. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She closed her eyes and imagined herself at the piano, her fingers gliding over the keys effortlessly. She imagined the music flowing out of her, strong and clear, carrying her emotions to the audience. For a brief moment, she felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark of confidence. But it was quickly overshadowed by the fear that she might not live up to her own image, the image of a talented, flawless pianist. The whispers of her doubts grew louder. She worried about missing notes, about playing too fast or too slow, about making mistakes that would ruin the performance. She worried about the people in the audience who had come with high expectations, expecting a flawless display of skill. She worried about herself, about whether she was truly capable of handling the pressure. The fear clawed at her chest, making it hard to breathe, making it hard to think clearly. She thought about her journey, about the long years of dedication that had brought her here. She remembered waking up before dawn to practice, skipping outings with friends, missing family gatherings. She remembered the endless drills, the scales, the repetitions of difficult passages. She remembered the teachers who pushed her, the critics who doubted her, and the moments when she had almost given up. Every sacrifice had been made for this moment, yet now it felt like too much. The weight of expectation was crushing. She tried to focus on the music, to remember why she had started playing in the first place. Music had always been her escape, her joy, her voice when words failed her. But now, the music seemed to mock her, reminding her of the stakes, of the need for perfection. She felt a mix of love and fear for the piano, the instrument that had given her so much and now demanded so much in return. The sound of footsteps made her startle. Another performer was backstage, giving last-minute instructions to the stage crew. They smiled at her encouragingly, but their words felt hollow. No one could understand the turmoil inside her, the battle she fought silently. She was a performer, a prodigy to the world, but to herself, she was just someone who feared failing in front of everyone she had ever worked so hard to impress. She moved closer to the piano, her hands trembling slightly as they hovered over the keys. She remembered the countless times she had practiced this very piece, over and over again, until every note was etched into her memory. Yet, the thought of playing it perfectly in front of a live audience made her palms sweat. The familiar notes now seemed daunting, each one a potential stumbling block. Her mind raced with scenarios of failure, each more terrifying than the last. What if she forgot a passage? What if her fingers froze mid-performance? What if the audience noticed her fear? The possibilities seemed endless, and the pressure mounted with each passing second. She could almost hear the murmurs of disappointment, see the questioning looks in the eyes of those who had believed in her. Despite the fear, she took another deep breath and reminded herself of her capabilities. She was not a beginner. She was a pianist with years of training, someone who had overcome challenges before. She had faced moments of doubt, moments of fear, and had always found a way to push through. The fear was real, but so was her skill. She knew that deep down, she had the ability to play beautifully, to let the music speak for her. She thought about the people who had supported her, her family, her teachers, the friends who had believed in her talent. She thought about the sacrifices they had made to help her succeed, the encouragement they had given, the patience they had shown. Their belief in her was stronger than any fear she felt. She drew strength from their trust, letting it bolster her confidence. The lights dimmed, signaling that it was almost time to begin. The audience's murmurs grew louder, a wave of anticipation that swept through the hall. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, every expectation pressing down like a physical force. But she also felt something else, a sense of purpose, a connection to the music that had carried her through every challenge. She reminded herself why she was there, why she had chosen this path, why she loved the piano. With trembling hands, she positioned herself at the piano bench, feeling the smooth keys beneath her fingers. The familiar weight of the instrument felt grounding, almost comforting. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking one last deep breath, and allowed herself to focus entirely on the music. In that moment, fear and excitement intertwined, creating a strange clarity. She realized that she could not control every outcome, but she could control her effort, her emotion, her expression. The pianist opened her eyes, glanced at the audience, and felt a surge of determination. She knew the pressure was immense, but she also knew that this was her moment. She could let fear dictate her performance, or she could rise above it and let the music flow through her. The choice was hers. And in that instant, as the spotlight shone down and the audience held its breath, she made a silent promise to herself. She would play with everything she had, leaving nothing behind. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar texture and the potential within them. The stage was ready, the audience was waiting, and she was poised at the edge of something extraordinary. The pressure was still there, heavy and undeniable, but it no longer felt paralyzing. Instead, it felt like a challenge, a call to rise to her full potential. She could feel the music humming beneath her fingertips, ready to emerge. As the first notes escaped the piano, trembling but full of intent, she felt a shift within her. The fear remained, but it was joined by focus, determination, and a deep connection to her craft. She was aware of the pressure, yet she no longer allowed it to define her. Instead, she let it fuel her, channeling every ounce of emotion, skill, and experience into the performance. In that moment, the journey that had brought her here, every sacrifice, every doubt, every moment of perseverance, felt justified and powerful. The audience remained silent, their attention fixed on her. She could sense their expectation, but she no longer saw it as a threat. It was an invitation, a chance to share her passion, to transform nervous energy into art. She had faced fear before, but never on a stage of this magnitude. And yet, as she began to play, she realized that fear and talent could coexist. The pressure was immense, but it was also exhilarating, pushing her to be her best. With every note, she felt herself grow stronger, more confident, more in tune with the music. The trembling in her hands began to fade, replaced by a steady rhythm and an unwavering focus. The spotlight no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a partner in the performance, highlighting her presence and giving life to the music. She understood that pressure was not the enemy. It was a sign of the importance of this moment, a reminder of how far she had come and how much she was capable of. By the time she finished the first few bars, a sense of calm settled over her. The fear had not disappeared, but it had transformed into energy, a driving force that propelled her forward. She was aware of every note, every pause, every nuance, yet she no longer felt trapped by expectation. Instead, she was liberated, empowered by the very pressure that had once seemed unbearable. She realized that this was not just a performance. It was a testament to her journey, her dedication, and her love for music. The pianist continued to play, each note a declaration of resilience, talent, and emotion. The pressure of the spotlight, which had once loomed like an insurmountable mountain, had become a catalyst for greatness. She was no longer a performer weighed down by fear. She was an artist in command of her craft, ready to captivate the audience and make this moment unforgettable. And as the music filled the hall, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, facing the pressure head-on and turning it into something beautiful. Backstage was a blur of movement, noise, and tension. She paced slowly, hands brushing over her piano case as if it were a lifeline. The hum of conversation and footsteps echoed around her, but she felt isolated, trapped inside a bubble of doubt and anticipation. She had prepared for this performance for years, yet the moment felt bigger than anything she had ever experienced. Her mind kept racing with thoughts of mistakes, of what might go wrong, of the judgment waiting in every pair of eyes. She glanced at her reflection in a nearby mirror, catching sight of the tension in her shoulders, the faint tremble in her hands, and the worry in her eyes. Every part of her body seemed to betray the calm exterior that the audience might one day expect. She took a deep breath, trying to force her mind back to focus, but the weight of expectation pressed down harder with every passing second. She had always been called a prodigy, someone capable of extraordinary talent, yet that label felt like both a compliment and a curse. It reminded her that everyone expected perfection, and perfection was a heavy burden to carry. Memories of her journey flooded her thoughts. She remembered sitting alone in her small room as a child, practicing scales for hours while the world outside carried on. She remembered her teacher correcting her posture, her fingers, her technique with a sharp eye, never letting a single mistake pass unnoticed. She remembered the early competitions, the applause, the quiet pride when she did well, and the sting of failure when she didn't. Each memory reminded her how much effort she had poured into reaching this point, yet the fear of not being enough clung stubbornly to her. She approached her piano case and opened it carefully, as if opening a treasure chest. The keys gleamed under the dim backstage lights, smooth and inviting. She ran her fingers over them lightly, feeling a strange mix of comfort and intimidation. This instrument had been her companion through countless hours of practice, yet now it seemed to loom larger than life. It was a friend she trusted, but also a challenge she could not ignore. Every note she played in her mind had to be perfect, or it would not only disappoint her audience but also herself. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of other performers preparing nearby. They moved with a calm confidence she envied, their steps measured, their faces composed. She wondered if they too felt the same fear she did, or if they had found some secret to mastering it. She felt both admiration and envy, wishing she could borrow even a fraction of their calm. Her own nerves seemed to amplify with each passing moment, the quiet hum of anxiety growing louder until it drowned out everything else. Sitting down briefly, she tried to close her eyes and center herself. She imagined the music, flowing freely, her fingers moving effortlessly, every note perfect. In that mental rehearsal, she felt a spark of hope. She remembered the countless times she had reached this feeling, moments when she had played as if the piano itself guided her hands. Yet even with these memories, the real stage felt intimidating, larger and more demanding than any practice room or small concert hall she had ever known. She recalled her family's sacrifices and support, the early mornings and late nights, the financial strain and the emotional weight they had shared with her. Her journey had not been easy. Every practice session had been a test of patience, endurance, and resilience. Every teacher, every mentor, every critic had shaped her into the musician she was today. But the pressure of the present moment made her question whether it was enough. Could she translate years of practice into a flawless live performance? Could she meet the expectations of thousands of eyes staring, of hearts waiting to be moved? Her fingers tapped nervously against the piano keys as she rehearsed in fragments, testing her memory of difficult passages. Each note seemed heavier than the last, each measure a challenge she had to overcome. She struggled with the same small mistakes that haunted her during practice, mistakes that seemed amplified by the pressure of anticipation. She closed her eyes, imagining the audience watching, feeling their anticipation, and tried to push away the fear. But the fear was persistent, a shadow that refused to lift. She remembered times when she had doubted herself before, moments when the weight of expectation had threatened to overwhelm her. Each time, she had fought through the uncertainty, finding a strength she did not know she possessed. Yet now, with the largest audience of her life waiting, the fear felt sharper, more immediate, more real. It was no longer about the notes, the music, or even the piano. It was about proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged on this stage. She thought about the people who had believed in her, mentors who had guided her, friends who had cheered for her, and fans who had followed her career with unwavering support. Their belief in her became a source of determination, a reminder that she was not alone in this challenge. Each encouraging word, each quiet act of support, reminded her of the trust placed in her, and slowly, she began to feel the first hints of confidence returning. It was fragile, easily shattered, but it was enough to keep her moving forward. The stage manager called her name softly, signaling that it was almost time. She rose from the bench, hands still trembling slightly, and took a deep breath. She imagined walking toward the piano, imagining the keys beneath her fingers, imagining the music filling the hall. She reminded herself that this was not just a performance. It was a chance to share her passion, to express herself, to let the music speak when words could not. The thought grounded her, giving her a purpose beyond fear. As she approached the stage, she felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. The bright lights and the eager eyes of the audience loomed ahead, but she also felt the quiet strength she had built over years of practice. She remembered the countless hours spent perfecting her craft, the moments of doubt that she had overcome, the small victories that had accumulated into her current skill. She reminded herself that she was prepared, that she was capable, and that she had faced fear before and emerged stronger. Backstage, she took one final moment to center herself, feeling the familiar texture of the piano keys and the weight of the music she would soon play. The noise of the hall faded slightly as she focused on her breathing, on the rhythm of her heartbeat, on the connection between herself and her instrument. The fear had not vanished, but it had transformed into energy, a force that could be directed into the music, rather than against her. The pianist stepped onto the stage, feeling the spotlight wash over her. The audience's murmur reached her ears, a wave of anticipation that both intimidated and inspired her. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar pressure and weight, and allowed herself to focus entirely on the music. Each note, each phrase, each movement became a bridge between her fear and her talent, a way to channel anxiety into expression. As she began to play, she realized that the struggles backstage had prepared her for this moment. Every tremble of doubt, every pang of anxiety, every challenge she had faced had strengthened her, teaching her patience, resilience, and focus. The music began to flow more freely, her fingers finding their place on the keys, her mind attuned to the rhythm, the melody, and the emotion. The pressure remained, but it no longer threatened to overwhelm her. Instead, it became a partner, a force that pushed her to reach deeper into her ability, to communicate more fully through her performance. With each passing measure, her confidence grew. She remembered the countless hours of preparation, the guidance of mentors, and the support of loved ones. The piano, once intimidating, became a trusted ally. The audience, once a source of fear, became witnesses to her expression, participants in the shared experience of music. She allowed herself to feel every note, every pause, every emotion, transforming anxiety into artistry. By the time she finished the first section of her performance, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The struggle behind the scenes had not been in vain. It had shaped her, strengthened her, and allowed her to step into her power as a musician. The fear that had seemed so overwhelming now existed alongside a growing confidence, creating a balance that enabled her to play with authenticity and passion. She understood that struggle was not something to avoid, but something to embrace, for it had prepared her to shine in this very moment. She stepped into the spotlight, and for a moment, everything else vanished. The bright lights were almost blinding, and the audience stretched out before her like an endless sea of faces. Each one seemed to be waiting, watching, silently demanding perfection. Her heart raced, her palms were sweaty, and a wave of nervous energy coursed through her body. She felt the enormity of the moment pressing down on her, heavier than any challenge she had faced before. She adjusted her posture at the piano, inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly, trying to steady her racing mind. The hall was silent except for the faint rustle of programs and the occasional cough, but in her mind, there was a storm of doubts. What if she forgot a note? What if her hands froze? What if her years of practice were not enough? The fear was almost tangible, a heavy cloud hovering over her, threatening to crush her confidence. She remembered the countless times she had faced similar fears, though never on such a grand stage. Each rehearsal, each competition, each small audience had been a test of nerves, but this felt different. The stakes were higher, the expectations greater, and the spotlight more intense. She could feel the history of all her previous performances behind her, guiding her, yet she still felt vulnerable, exposed, and uncertain. Closing her eyes for a brief moment, she tried to visualize the music. She imagined her fingers moving effortlessly over the keys, the melodies flowing naturally, the rhythm perfectly aligned. In her mind, she played the piece flawlessly, each note resonating with clarity and emotion. The visualization brought a flicker of calm, a small sense of hope, yet it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of the live performance waiting before her. She opened her eyes and scanned the audience, trying to find familiar faces or friendly expressions, but all she saw were strangers who had come expecting brilliance. Each face seemed to carry its own judgment, its own expectation, and the weight of their gaze intensified her anxiety. Yet beneath the fear, she felt a flicker of determination, a quiet resolve that reminded her why she had chosen this path, why she had dedicated her life to music. She took another deep breath and reminded herself of all she had overcome. She thought about the early mornings, the late nights, the endless practice sessions, and the sacrifices she had made. She remembered her teachers and mentors who had guided her, corrected her, and pushed her to reach her full potential. She remembered the moments of doubt and the moments of triumph, each one shaping her into the musician she had become. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had prepared her for this very moment. The pianist felt a tremor of fear in her hands as she hovered over the keys. She had memorized every note, every dynamic, every pause, yet the fear of failure persisted. Her fingers twitched nervously, and her heart beat faster with every second. She could hear her own breathing, loud and uneven, in the silence of the hall. But she also felt the quiet strength that had carried her through every challenge, the resilience that had allowed her to continue even when doubt seemed overwhelming. She focused on the first note, imagining the sound it would make, the feeling it would convey. She reminded herself that the music was not just about technique or perfection, but about expression, about conveying emotion, about connecting with the audience. She thought about the joy she had always felt when playing, the way music had been a refuge, a voice for what words could not express. That thought brought her a sense of peace, a small anchor in the sea of anxiety. The pianist shifted slightly in her seat, feeling the familiar weight of the piano beneath her. She adjusted her fingers, letting them rest lightly on the keys, and focused on the rhythm of her heartbeat, matching it with the rhythm of the music in her mind. She reminded herself that fear was natural, that even the most accomplished musicians experienced it, and that it did not define her. What mattered was how she responded to it, how she transformed it into energy, into expression, into artistry. As she prepared to play, she became aware of the subtle movements of the audience, the quiet anticipation, the collective breath held in suspense. Each moment stretched out, a fragile balance between fear and focus, between hesitation and action. She knew that the first note would set the tone, that it would determine the flow of the performance, and the pressure was almost overwhelming. Yet she also knew that she had the skills, the experience, and the passion to meet the challenge. She recalled the times she had faced similar pressures, the moments when nerves had threatened to derail her, and yet she had prevailed. Each experience had taught her patience, control, and the importance of trusting herself. She reminded herself that the audience was not there to witness failure, but to share in the beauty of the music, to experience the emotion and dedication she brought to the piano. That thought brought her a renewed sense of purpose, a reason to step beyond fear and into action. The pianist took one final deep breath, closing her eyes briefly to center herself. She felt the connection between her mind, her body, and the piano, the harmony of preparation and instinct. She acknowledged the fear, accepted it, and let it settle into a focused energy. The first note lingered in her mind, a promise, a commitment, a step forward into the unknown. She was ready, even if the fear remained, to face the audience and let the music flow. When her fingers finally touched the keys, the sound was soft but confident, a declaration that she was present, engaged, and prepared. The music began to unfold, tentative at first, then gradually with more assurance and fluidity. Each note carried a fragment of her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her emotions. The fear did not vanish, but it transformed into a driving force, giving intensity to the performance, depth to the expression, and authenticity to every phrase. She became aware of the audience's response, subtle but undeniable, as they leaned forward, captivated by the opening notes. The energy of the hall seemed to merge with her own, a dialogue between performer and listeners, a shared experience of anticipation, emotion, and artistry. She realized that the audience's expectations were not a threat, but a connection, an opportunity to convey what she felt through her music. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, each note building on the last, weaving together melody and emotion, technique and expression. The initial tremor of doubt receded, replaced by a focused clarity, a deep engagement with the music that allowed her to transcend fear. She felt the familiar rhythm of performance, the ebb and flow of tension and release, the delicate balance of control and spontaneity that defined her art. As the performance continued, she noticed the subtle smiles, the attentive posture, the rapt expressions of the audience. Their engagement fueled her, reinforced her confidence, and encouraged her to play with even more passion. She realized that the moment before the performance, filled with fear and doubt, had been a necessary preparation, a stage of growth that allowed her to fully inhabit the music. The tension she had felt backstage and in the first moments on stage had transformed into energy, concentration, and artistry. The pianist allowed herself to feel the music fully, letting it guide her fingers, her body, her emotions. Each note, each phrase, each pause became a channel for expression, a bridge between her inner world and the audience's perception. The fear remained as a background hum, but it was no longer dominant. It was a companion, a reminder of the stakes, the effort, and the passion that had brought her here. By the time she reached the middle of the piece, she had found a rhythm that balanced focus and freedom, precision and emotion. The audience was no longer just observers. They were participants, sharing in the experience, responding to the music with subtle gestures, attentive silence, and quiet admiration. The pianist felt a profound connection, a sense of purpose, and a validation of every sacrifice and struggle that had led her to this point. She knew that the performance was more than a display of skill. It was a testament to resilience, dedication, and courage. The moment before the performance, with all its fear and anticipation, had been transformed into an experience of flow, expression, and shared humanity. She had faced the enormity of the stage, the judgment of the audience, and the pressure of expectation, and in doing so had discovered a deeper strength, a truer confidence, and a more authentic artistry. As the final notes of the opening section lingered in the hall, the pianist felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had navigated the fear, embraced the pressure, and transformed it into music. The journey of doubt, anticipation, and preparation had culminated in a moment of expression that felt both vulnerable and powerful. She knew that the rest of the performance awaited, that challenges would continue, but for now, she had proven to herself that she could face the moment before the performance with courage, focus, and grace. As her fingers moved over the keys, something shifted within her. The anxiety that had gripped her backstage and in the first moments of the performance began to melt away, replaced by a calm focus she had only experienced in her most private, uninterrupted practices. The music seemed to flow naturally now, as if the piano itself were guiding her hands. Each note carried meaning, each phrase told a story, and she felt connected to the music in a way that transcended technique or expectation. She lost track of the audience for a moment, feeling only the rhythm and melody, the rise and fall of the harmonies, and the subtle interplay of dynamics. She realized she was no longer thinking about mistakes, about judgment, or about the pressure she had felt earlier. She was immersed in the music, her body and mind aligned with the instrument, every movement precise yet fluid, every sound full of emotion. The transformation was not instant, but gradual. At first, she had noticed the fear lingering in the corners of her mind, whispering doubts, reminding her of every possible failure. Slowly, the sound of the music grew louder in her awareness than the whispers of fear. Her confidence started to return, not as a conscious decision, but as a natural consequence of connecting fully with what she loved to do most. The music itself became a shield and a channel, allowing her to convert nervous energy into artistry. As she played, she thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing, the early mornings and late nights, the repetitions of scales, arpeggios, and difficult passages. She remembered the challenges she had overcome, the moments when she had doubted herself, and the moments when she had triumphed despite fear. Every experience had built her into the musician she had become, and now, on the stage, those lessons came alive. The struggles that had once seemed daunting were now the foundation for her transformation. Her hands moved with confidence, no longer trembling. Her fingers found the keys with precision and grace, producing sound that was both technically perfect and emotionally rich. The music she had practiced for so long now had a life of its own, a vitality that came from her deep connection to it. She felt as if she were telling a story with each note, conveying her emotions to the audience without a single word. The fear and pressure were still present, but they had become energy she could harness, pushing her to play with greater expression and intensity. She became aware of the subtle reactions of the audience, the leaning forward, the attentive eyes, the quiet appreciation. Their energy seemed to merge with hers, creating a dialogue between performer and listener. She realized that music was not just about playing notes. It was about communication, about sharing emotion, about creating a shared experience. This awareness added a new layer to her performance, a depth that went beyond technical skill. She remembered the journey that had brought her here, the teachers who had guided her, the family who had supported her, the mentors who had challenged her, and the friends who had encouraged her. Their belief in her had been a constant thread, supporting her even when she had doubted herself. Now, their faith became a quiet strength within her, reinforcing the transformation that was unfolding. She understood that she was not performing alone. She carried the support and love of many with her. The music continued to flow, each phrase building upon the last, creating a narrative that was at once personal and universal. She felt herself becoming one with the piano, a seamless extension of the instrument, allowing the music to express what she could not put into words. The audience was captivated, drawn into the story she was telling through sound, unaware of the fears that had gripped her just moments ago. She realized that true artistry was not about perfection but about authenticity, about letting the music reveal her inner world. Her body relaxed into the rhythm, her posture natural, her hands agile and precise. She was fully immersed in the performance, her focus complete, her mind clear. The fear of failure no longer controlled her. Instead, it had been transformed into a driving force, a motivation to express herself fully. She felt a sense of liberation, a release from the pressure that had weighed so heavily on her, replaced by the joy and fulfillment that came from creating beauty. Each note she played felt significant, each pause intentional, each dynamic choice a reflection of her understanding and emotion. She realized that the music was guiding her as much as she was guiding it. The piece that had once seemed intimidating was now a canvas for her expression, a medium through which she could convey her thoughts, feelings, and experiences. The transformation was complete. She had moved from fear and doubt to confidence and artistry. She thought about the audience again, now seeing them as partners in the performance. Their attention, their energy, their silent reactions were part of the musical experience. She felt connected to them, not through words, but through sound, through the emotions she was conveying. The fear of judgment had disappeared, replaced by a sense of shared humanity, a mutual understanding that music could communicate what words could not. She understood that the transformation was not just personal but relational, a bridge between herself and those who listened. The performance reached its most challenging section, a sequence of fast, intricate passages that had once caused her anxiety. Yet now, she approached them with confidence and clarity. Her fingers danced across the keys, precise and agile, each note clear and resonant. She felt exhilaration, the thrill of conquering difficulty, and the satisfaction of seeing preparation and skill merge seamlessly. The transformation had allowed her to rise above fear, to embrace the challenge, and to play with freedom and expression. As the piece progressed, she felt an increasing sense of mastery, not just over the technical aspects of the music but over herself. The transformation had given her control, focus, and presence. She was fully engaged in the moment, fully connected to the music, fully aware of the beauty she was creating. She realized that this was what it meant to be a true artist, to transform fear and pressure into expression, to convey emotion through skill, and to connect with others through creativity. The hall seemed to dissolve around her, leaving only her and the piano. The lights, the audience, the expectations faded into the background as she focused entirely on the music. Every note became a reflection of her inner world, every phrase a story, every pause a moment of expression. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, a deep joy that came from being fully present, fully engaged, and fully herself. She thought back to the early days of her training, the countless repetitions, the moments of doubt, the small victories that had shaped her. Each experience had contributed to this transformation, had prepared her to turn fear into artistry. She realized that the struggles she had faced were not obstacles but lessons, each one teaching her resilience, patience, and the ability to connect deeply with her craft. The transformation she was experiencing now was the culmination of all that effort, a testament to dedication and perseverance. Her music reached a climactic point, full of intensity and emotion. She played with passion, with precision, with authenticity. The audience was completely captivated, drawn into the story she was telling. The transformation she had undergone backstage and in the early moments of the performance was now fully realized on stage, visible in her playing, in her expression, and in the emotional impact on those listening. She had become not just a performer but a conduit for the music, a vessel through which beauty and emotion flowed. As the final notes lingered, resonating in the hall, she felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. The fear that had once seemed insurmountable had been transformed into focus, confidence, and artistry. She had embraced the pressure, harnessed her anxiety, and allowed the music to guide her. The audience, moved by the performance, responded with heartfelt applause, their appreciation a reflection of the authenticity and passion she had conveyed. The transformation was complete. She had played not just with skill but with soul, leaving an impression that would linger long after the performance ended. The final notes of the piece echoed through the hall, lingering in the air as if reluctant to leave. For a brief moment, there was complete silence, a suspended pause in which the audience seemed to hold its breath. She felt her body relax, the tension that had gripped her for hours melting away like ice under sunlight. Her hands hovered above the keys, reluctant to break the spell of the music that had consumed her, transformed her, and carried her through the performance. She realized she had done it. She had played not just with skill, but with her heart, and the music had spoken for her. Then the applause came, a wave of sound that filled the hall and swept over her like a tide. She felt it in her chest, resonating through every nerve and muscle, shaking away the remnants of fear and doubt. She had expected some applause, but not this overwhelming, almost tangible appreciation. The audience rose to their feet, their claps and cheers echoing in the grand hall. She felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of relief, joy, and pride. She had feared failure, worried about mistakes, and yet she had triumphed. She allowed herself to look out over the audience, seeing the faces of people moved by her performance. She saw smiles, some with tears glistening, some with awe, and others with sheer delight. In that moment, she felt a connection with them, a silent understanding that transcended words. Her music had communicated what words could not. It had told her story, expressed her emotions, and shared a piece of her soul with those who listened. She understood now that the fear she had felt was not a barrier but a passage, a necessary part of reaching this moment of triumph. She remembered all the steps that had led her here. The early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices of family and friends, the countless hours spent practicing, and the moments of self-doubt that had tested her resolve. Each struggle, each challenge had prepared her for this performance. She realized that triumph was not just the applause or the recognition. It was the culmination of every effort, every setback, and every small victory along the way. She had faced herself, her fears, and the pressure of expectation, and emerged stronger, more confident, and more complete as an artist. As she stood to acknowledge the audience, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the support she had received, for the teachers who had guided her, for the mentors who had challenged her, and for the friends and family who had believed in her even when she doubted herself. She thought about the journey, about the struggles she had endured, and about the strength she had discovered within herself. Each of these elements had contributed to her success, to the transformation she had experienced, and to the triumphant performance that had just concluded. Backstage, after the audience's applause had died down, she felt a wave of exhaustion mixed with exhilaration. Her hands were sore, her muscles tense, yet her heart was full. She reflected on the performance, replaying the music in her mind, noting where she had felt in complete control and where she had felt the tiniest flickers of doubt. Yet, even those moments of doubt had become part of the music, adding authenticity and emotion to her expression. She realized that perfection was not about eliminating fear but about embracing it and allowing it to fuel her art. She thought about the young students she had once taught, the beginners who looked up to her, and the moments she had encouraged them to persevere through challenges. She remembered telling them that fear was a companion, not an enemy, and that true growth came from facing it. Now, having experienced it herself on such a grand stage, she understood the truth of those words more deeply than ever. Triumph came not from the absence of fear, but from the courage to continue despite it. She took a quiet moment to appreciate the piano itself, the instrument that had carried her through every practice session, every performance, and now this moment of transformation. She felt a profound connection to it, recognizing that it was not just a tool but a partner in her artistry. The piano had given her the medium through which she could express herself fully, and she had honored it with her dedication, focus, and emotional honesty. In that partnership, she had found her voice, her confidence, and her triumph. Reflecting on the audience, she realized that the connection she had felt was mutual. They had not only witnessed her performance, they had participated in it, responding with their attention, their energy, and their emotion. Music had become a bridge between her and them, a shared experience that went beyond words, beyond expectation, and beyond judgment. In that realization, she found a sense of fulfillment that was deeper than any applause or recognition. She had touched lives, even in a small way, through the honesty of her music. She considered the pressure that had weighed on her so heavily before the performance, the fear of failure, the anxiety about mistakes, and the weight of expectations. All of it had been transformed into energy that fueled her playing, sharpened her focus, and deepened her expression. She understood now that pressure was not an enemy but a teacher, a force that demanded her best, challenged her limits, and ultimately revealed her potential. The triumph she felt was intertwined with the very challenges she had feared. Her mind wandered briefly to the critics who would later write reviews. She realized that their words, whether praising or critiquing, were secondary to the experience she had just lived. The true reward was the transformation, the journey, and the connection she had achieved. She had faced her fears, embraced the music, and expressed herself fully. That was the triumph that mattered most, the proof that she was capable, resilient, and deeply connected to her art. She remembered the feeling of doubt that had gripped her backstage, the trembling of her hands, the racing of her heart, and the swirl of anxious thoughts. She thought about how she had allowed those fears to guide her rather than control her, how she had transformed nervous energy into a focused, expressive performance. The memory of that fear now seemed distant, almost like a shadow she had stepped beyond. Triumph had been born from the struggle, a victory not just over the audience's expectations, but over her own uncertainty. As the evening continued and the audience slowly began to leave, she lingered for a moment at the piano, absorbing the quiet of the emptying hall. She reflected on what she had learned, on the courage she had discovered, and on the depth of her connection to music. She understood that each performance, each struggle, and each triumph was part of a larger journey, a continuous process of growth, expression, and self-discovery. The applause, while meaningful, was only a part of the experience. The true triumph lay in the transformation she had undergone and the honesty with which she had performed. She considered the future, the performances yet to come, the challenges she would face, and the opportunities to continue expressing herself through music. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she could face any stage, any audience, and any pressure with the same courage, focus, and authenticity. Triumph was not a single moment but an ongoing journey, a continuous practice of embracing fear, expressing emotion, and connecting with others through art. Finally, as she closed the piano and walked off stage, she felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. She had faced the fear that had once seemed overwhelming, transformed it into music, and shared a part of herself with the world. The journey from doubt to triumph had been arduous, filled with challenges, but it had revealed her strength, resilience, and the depth of her artistry. She understood that true triumph was not measured solely by applause, recognition, or perfection, but by the courage to face oneself, the willingness to embrace vulnerability, and the ability to express the heart through music. In that moment, she felt complete, victorious, and ready for whatever lay ahead.